like, not to like come at anyone, but I do think it's fair to point out that some people have strengths and weaknesses in other areas. I think a lot of the traditional film people don't necessarily do a great job of applying their analysis. I think they have good film takes and they understand the game. And a lot of the ways that I was just talking about taking stuff from video games, like they understand a lot of these X's and O's things. But like one of the things I love about you, you're often talking about how like we're just nerds. Like we're playing a board game. We're playing some nerdy thing that has a fake scoring system. Just because you can analyze football is not going to make you necessarily be able to apply it on the data side and on the number side and how these things come together. You have to have a mix of both. But I do, over the years, I started very data heavy. And over the years, I have shifted more. And you know, in the last question, I was talking all about my childhood, but you asked like why I think it's so important to look at the bigger picture stuff. And I mean, the NFL is this living, evolving thing, right? Yeah. And so we have, you know, a couple examples I wrote down: pass rate over time, right? We've seen like a huge shift in pass rate. We have the scheme changes based on rules changes and things like that. A decade ago, shotgun was just becoming like more and more popular. Like it's just in the time that I've been a fantasy writer, where I know early in my career, I was writing about how shotgun was picking up and 3 wide receiver sets. Now we're in this current 2 high shell era, trying to take away the explosives on defense and how that impacts what the offenses are able to do. And so you have eras and time frames and things that are impacting the ways that the offenses can scheme and what they want to do, but also how they're able to do it. And then what players benefit in those types of things. And all of that is so important in addition to the player, you know, profiles and a lot of those elements, and like some of your great models that you have built for like young players, for rookies and year 2 players. Those types of things are very important on the player level as well. But we do have to understand the context of how does it fit into the scheme and where's the NFL go, right? And so there's a lot of elements there that are really interesting. I do think there's a huge advantage to watching the games when you are a data person who understands it, and you're not like, I don't think that means you're a film guy, but I do think if you understand fantasy, the nerd game, you know, understand data, and then you're watching the games for yourself, like you're understanding how that data is being compiled in a way that you're going to be able to apply it and have a real edge that people on both sides of this film versus data thing don't necessarily bridge that gap. The data people, I think, are too focused on the box score sometimes. The film people, I don't think, can apply down to the statistical level what that means for fantasy. They're like, I really like this guy in film, draft him on your fantasy league, but they don't understand the market. They don't understand the dynamics around, you know. And so you see and the reality of football as well, and we obviously talk about this a ton in our stuff, but it's small samples all the way down, right? It's an evolving sport, and even multi-year things, it creates, you know, segmented small samples because there's changes in offenses and things. So what is so rare is a consistently dominant player over a long career. And we all like to think about this in Dynasty. Like this guy is, you know, Jamar Chase is going to be a great receiver for the next decade. Well, I mean, a lot of things have to happen there, right? I mean, and he is tied to Joe Burrow. It probably can happen, but that's rare, right? Like what Travis Kelce and Mahomes have done over the last 5 years, that doesn't happen as much as we want to believe it does. There's a lot of high-level producers that then don't do anything for, you know, another several years for whatever reason, right?
Yeah. I think the other thing too with the data versus film stuff is that I think that what you're sort of getting at too is that if you have like a baseline of understanding football, like I'm not going to sit here and analyze film the way that Kurt Warner does, right? It's just, it would be ridiculously stupid for me to think that I can do that. It's no different than any other. I mean, like I'm probably within the fantasy football space, like a 50th percentile film watcher, if you will, right? Like there's nothing like overly special about the way that, but I am watching everything, every game, every single week, all the time, because I want to sound competent when I'm talking about this stuff. And I think it is helpful. But at the same time, if you understand the basic concepts of what's going on a football field, and you understand the trends at a high level and where things are moving, it'll help you discover data then while you're searching for data and while you're researching to then come up with new and different ideas to then help you with game theory and help you with strategy. I think a great example of this is what you did over the offseason that I then sort of piled on with the RPO stuff, where you researched what happens to pass catchers when they're on these RPO heavy teams. And then I was like, wow, this is really interesting. We did a podcast with CBS on it a little bit. And I was like, afterwards, I'm like, I got to research this a little bit more. And there was a little bit of signal in there that heavy RPO teams tend to focus their target share on one guy. And it makes sense logically if you understand what goes down with an RPO, and that whenever they do end up throwing it, they're doing it in a very quick, it's a very fast decision-making process. And so they're not able to just go read after read after read like they're just chilling in the pocket. It's a much different situation. And so as a result, when you can combine this narrative and this story with the data and just understanding football at a baseline, it's nothing crazy. It's just that if you can understand that and then you have the understanding and resources to dive into the data, it can be really, really helpful.